Welcome back to the Mid-Year Mitch YouTube channel. In today's episode, we're gluing the front end on the 67 Corvette Overkill, and I'm going to show you how to get your hood to fit, as well as set your hood to fender height and get the inner fenders locked in place. So be sure to stick around. Last week, we ripped the front end off of Overkill, cut the side gills off, pulled the inner fenders out, flipped it upside down, and installed some bonding strips in it so we can install new press molded sides. All of this effort is to make the front end fit better. A consequence of making it fit better was unfortunately having to cut all of the flanges off of the firewall to be able to channel them down so that way the front end can sit down. The front end was too high in a lot of places, and whenever I glued the front end the first time, it actually had a little bit of a bump in it right here from this bonding strip and this one right here. So I ended up cutting all of them off except for this one. So basically what we need to do first is scuff all of these up, and it may look a little rough what we're doing here, but this is still going to be in line with the Corvette structure. We're going to scuff these and glue them, and this bonding strip is actually glued in place. You can see some of the double layer thickness. Once these are mocked up and glued in and stuff, we can work on final fitting the front end to the car and getting the inner fenders caught up. I still have to remove a lot of glue, get a lot of cleanup done so we can get this in place. Also, we have to work on our hood. This is an aftermarket Stinger hood. You can tell the rivets aren't quite the original type. They're not pop rivets, but they're not quite the original ones. I had to scuff the underside to smooth it out. But the big problem that we're having right now is the engine hits this L88 style scoop. So we need to pull this air intake out, which I had to cut and modify and whittle to get it to fit. So we got to pull that out. We got to blast it out. Then we'll have room for that LT4 supercharger, and then we'll actually be able to fit the hood to the car. So I have the front end sitting on here. We have all our bonding strips in place. They're all cut down. And you can see we've got a little bit of gap around all of them. That's okay. We will build a little bit of that up with fiberall, but our gaps look pretty good. And if I just lightly push it where it needs to go, you can see we're gonna have a nice flow to the door. So I like that. We'll pull the front end off, clean everything, and let's get these bonding strips glued in place. So I did some playing around with the front end. Everything is scuffed on the underside. I used some fiberall on the back side to build up some of the flanges. I had to do a little building up in some of these areas. But now you can see we have a really nice transition going between panel to panel. I have clamps on it, but we're lightly pushing down. I like to start out with this clamp in the corner that kind of pulls us to the door. I like to get this body line here because we care about trying to get that matched up, and then the rest of the clamps just follow. And on this side, this was our problem child, and you can see it's almost perfect. There's a little bit of goop on the door, and it may need to be built up a little bit on the car side, but that's pretty darn good. So now let's put a couple marks so we know where our glue has to stop. We'll clean everything up. We'll put our glue on this section of the cowl. and then we'll glue the front end on. Then after that dries, tomorrow we'll work on getting the inner fenders in. So I glued the front end on last night and I let it cure up and it's nice and solid. Now I like to leave my doors open, even though you're gonna get some ugly flashing and stuff whenever you do that. It keeps you from gluing your door shut, because I may have done that before. So now we need to go ahead and sand in the door jambs, so that way we can get the doors closed, pull the clamps off, and we can start fitting the hood. I did make some modifications to these hinges, like I've said. I wouldn't do this. I just plasma cut these out to make my hood fit. I wouldn't recommend doing that to anybody, but I did that because I glued the inner fenders in this front end. I glued the front end on the car, and then the day I was leaving for Carlisle, I set the hood on. That's not the way to do it. That's not what we're gonna do. We have the front end on, and I made sure that it's level. I measured from the peak or the body line here on both sides to the ground. This side was sitting up a little bit high. I could just lightly touch on it and it'd pull it down. So I just have a ratchet strap lightly pulling down to my engine crane just to make sure it was even. Now we need to set our inner fenders. So these can still move forward and backwards. These still need to be set, and the hood will tell us where to go. So first I'm gonna set the hood on to make sure we're in the right ballpark, and then we're gonna fill these in. Need to weld some pieces in. This side doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. This side is the side you'll see, so make that side nice, and these get painted black or engine bay color anyways. So that's fine. Once we get our hood set up, we'll know where the inner fenders go. We'll glue the front end. We need to put glue in this channel over here because this height can be set. So I have the hood resting on the car, and in the back there's no latches. So Dynamic sent me a bunch of these tongue depressors with some of their glue. So I duct taped a stack of them together, basically like this. And I have one set up for each side. That way we have our height set back here. And then in the front, this is where we can vary things. So I have attached this strut rod to the core support, but it's loose up top on both sides. The inner fenders are loose. The hood hinges are flat. There's no bolts in there. Make sure you check that. And you can see we're looking okay. We're fairly even-ish. The hood's a little high here, and the hood is higher than the car. Now when we bolt this down, it could come down, but what we're gonna do is a trick I learned from Vette Masters, is we have our port of power going from our core support to our steel reinforcement header bar that runs the whole way across the front end. We're just gonna put, make sure you guys can see what I'm doing. We're just gonna put a little bit of pressure, and if you watch, like over here, you can see the hood is disappearing. We're just gonna put a little extra pressure on it, and we think we need to, because we want the hood actually to sit a little bit lower, because it is harder to lower the hood than it is to raise it. So we're gonna give it a couple pumps, and now we're gonna have to play with our inner fender because it's loose in here. So right now, okay. So our hood is actually sitting on the hood ledge. Interesting. That is an unforeseen curveball. So with the hood off, this will better illustrate my problem. Look at this lip right here. See how it tips up and then it slowly rolls down a little bit from the end to about right there. See that? Now let's look at the driver's side. I don't know how well it shows up in the camera, but that's very significant. That's a large roll from here to there. So this thing is ramped way up right here. Great. So we have to relieve that or cut it, or I don't know. I mean, it could get squeezed down a little bit, but that's not how that's supposed to be. So this is resting on the bottom ledge of the hood here and pushing it up, which makes sense for whenever I glued the inner fenders in this the first time. I didn't pinch this down, so when we put the hood on, the hood sat 32 feet in the air, and it was this thing's fault. So we have the hood back on. I modified the hinges and everything's looking pretty good. I wanted to show you a couple tools that I've been working on. One are these little spacers that I have set up in the hood in like 4 different corners to help set the distance. So I printed them out like this. This is just a prototype, but there's different thicknesses in here and they match the thicknesses of this panel gapping tool. I made another version in white so it's easier to read the text, but it's 1/8 inch, 3/16, 1/4 inch, and 5/16. This is like a gapping tool that you can use to check your gaps in different areas. And these little guys you can tape to your car like I have here, and these will help you set your hood position or your door position, or if you're gluing on, you know, part of your fender or whatever, you can help set your gaps with these to keep stuff from moving. So if I like these, I'll put these on the website. It's just a cheap consumable little tool to add to the collection. But now we need to work on getting this to fit. I think I want to try to cut this lip under the hood, try to get the hood to sit properly. And then we're going to work on tightening these strut rods. And let's go ahead and get the inner fenders glued in. And then next week I think we'll worry about these, because unfortunately we discussed about different thicknesses of panels, and I don't know if you can see it, but this hand laid front end is much thicker than the press molded side fender. So we're gonna have to do a skim coat the whole way down this with fiberall to build it out. So that'll take a little bit of time to get that right, and I have to build it up against the door. I see a lot of people asking, how can you lower your hood whenever you're putting your hood on your car? Well, there are 2 different types of shims. You can use your regular shim that goes over both holes on the hood hinge and lifts the whole hinge up, or you can just use a single shim. And if we look under here, you can see the geometry of the hinge. The pivot point is further forward, and whenever you lift the back, it'll lower the front. So basically, if you just put a shim in the back, nothing in the front, you can lower this, and because of the distance between this to this, it'll give you a significant drop. So if you don't like the look of having a shim in here, you can even build this up with a little bit of fiberglass or something, just something nice and solid, even just under this pad. You can build that up a little bit in your bodywork, and that can compensate for maybe an aftermarket hood or an aftermarket front end. But our goal is to not do that. We're going to try to have 1 shim in here, so if we need to lower it, we just take that shim out, and if we need to raise it, we add shims. So I have quite the clamping apparatus going on, but the whole point of this structure is to give us a plane up here that we can use clamps to push down onto the hood surround to get it to sit nice with the car. That's all this is doing. I have this frame that I used for putting on quarter panels and side fenders. I just have some weight on it so we can push down in these tires or up against the chassis. So that way when we push down, this isn't picking up. And we have the porta power putting a little bit of pressure on it, so it's high right here. This will come down and we can take a shim out if we have to. But the whole idea here was to set the back of the hood at the height we like, set that corner up to the height that we like, and then we're going to try and push down on this fender cap to get it to line up with the hood as close as we can. And I need to put tape on the seam inside the car, but you can see up in here, this is the seam that we're going to be putting glue through. You can see there's a little bit of gap in the front, and we're going to be putting it through there and all around the inside of the parking light panel. But I want to put tape on that side so that way when we shoot our glue in, it just doesn't rain down into the engine compartment. So we're going to get this seam locked in, that one around the front, in through here and down here, and that'll lock the inner fenders in. So we have the inner fenders glued in. I'm just gonna let this guy cure up over the weekend. I decided to remove all the rubber feet off of the clamps. That way I could get a better visual of, where are we looking? How high are we compared to the hood? You can get a real good visual that way. And again, we're still a little high right here because we have pressure from the porta power right here. We're gonna release that. Once all this cures up, we'll probably entertain pulling a shim out of this side. But all this looks really nice. Now, I didn't record putting glue in this area up around the back side of here. I think it drops down through here and then under here because I had a hard enough time getting my own eyeballs in there, let alone all of you guys. So I apologize for that, but all I did was I took some of the glue and I put it on a spreader and I jammed the spreader in here, and then I had a tongue depressor that we used in the back, and I just used that to jam it in, and I got it from both sides. The most important thing whenever you're gluing stuff like this is to make sure you have good coverage and good thickness. You can see we have our seam gooped up through here. So the way the original seam works in here is that the glue thickness will, lock it together, but it'll also hold your height. So the nice thing about this dynamic glue, it's nice and thick, so it stays where you put it. I tried my best to jam it in there, and we have it all fairly smoothed out in there. Now, I didn't glue it, right here. There's a little part of the inner fender that's not glued, and we'll get that whenever we do the side fenders, which I'll do those next week. But I like having these in here. This kind of helped gauge where the hood was, because whenever you start pushing on stuff, things can move, and it did move, and I caught it, and I kind of pushed it back a little bit. We're a little tight here, but I'm gonna run with that because I know I have adjustment back. But this gap did close up, and I did have to push the inner fender back. You can see this one looks good, but this is good enough for right now, honestly. A little tight, but I'd rather run it a little tight. We know we have the adjustment on the hinge. I think I have the hinge too far forward, so that works out just fine. This apparatus looks complicated, but it's doing the job, and you can do this at home. Just the most important thing is to make sure whatever you're pushing on is anchored. This is anchored to the car, so we're pushing down, and this is pushing up, but it's pushing up on the car, and the car is obviously heavier, so it wins. And this should turn out pretty nice. It'll probably need a little bit of body work to get it to flow perfectly, just like any Corvette. There's a lot of curves and contours, and to get these to fit perfectly, you do a little body work. But I will say, I'll make another video on this. The dynamic glue is far superior to the 3M glue I've been using, and the main reason is it flows out thick and it stays thick. The 3M stuff is very thin and it kind of runs out. If you put a puddle in, it'll flow out, where the dynamic stuff, it's nice and thick, and if you put a fat bead, it's going to stay fat, and that gives you the maximum amount of squish, which I needed right here and on the bonding strip that's somewhere in here. I needed that little extra squish to make sure we had enough coverage. So That's something to keep in mind. If you're doing something like this, you know, where you have a pretty tight gap and you're very confident, you know, that if you push this together, glue's going to flow out. But something under here that you really can't reach, having that extra thickness guarantees that you have the proper adhesion. So that's the glue we're going to use from here on out. And next week we'll do the side fenders. We have to get those to fit properly, and then we're going to jump into seams. We got to do this big seam and the seam out the back, and then we have some fiberglass repairs. So hopefully we'll get Overkill back on his paws here soon, and once the snow clears, maybe get him rolled back over to his home. That's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Also leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Was this helpful? What type of videos would you guys like to see? It really helps my channel having all that engagement. And if you want to show your support even more for the channel, head over to my website, shop Mid-Year Mitch, or look up my Shopify store. I have my t-shirts, my tools, some little knickknacks on there, and I'm going to try to keep adding more tools. And we also have reproduction parts like vent windows, consoles, door posts for C1, C3 grills, and we're going to have some birdcage parts. I just listed a whole bunch of birdcage parts on there that are for sale, that are really nice quality, the same stuff you get from all the other stores. But if you want to buy it through me, I'm going to try to have the most competitive prices, and I'm going to try to keep everything in stock. And like, you know, if you watch my videos, you see how I install them, you see me use them, so you know they're good quality. So if you just want to show your support, try giving some business to me instead of one of the big box stores. I really appreciate it. So I got a lot of work to do, and I'll catch you guys later.